Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone stripped away your dignity in front of a crowd? Imagine being treated like you don't belong on a plane you helped build in a company you created from the ground up. One slap. One word. People like you. Now imagine you had a choice: stay silent and shrink into the humiliation, or stand tall and let the world see the truth. What would you choose? This is the story of Dr. Naomi Carter, a black CEO who boarded her own airline in disguise, only to face the kind of discrimination she had fought her whole life to erase. 80 passengers watched. Millions would soon join through a single live stream. And within minutes, one act of cruelty would turn into a turning point that shook an entire industry. If it were you, sitting in that seat, how would you respond? Would you let anger speak, or would you turn pain into power? Stay with us, because what happened next will make you question not only how airlines treat people, but how we all treat each other. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss stories that change the way we see the world. The sound cracked through the cabin like a rifle shot. For a heartbeat, the air seemed to freeze. 80 passengers turned at once, some gasping, others clutching their phones, recording instinctively. Dr. Naomi Carter's head snapped sideways, her dark curls spilling across her cheek like a curtain. A sharp sting spread across her skin, hot and humiliating. And then came the words, spat with venom, "People like you don't belong here." The voice belonged to flight attendant Linda Hayes. Her hand was still raised, trembling with rage. Her face, flushed red, seemed to quiver as the cabin fell into stunned silence. Naomi sat motionless, her hand slowly lifting to touch the burning welt on her cheek. Around her, row after row of passengers exchanged looks of disbelief. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" but the sentence was drowned out by the chorus of notifications pinging from phones going live. 3 rows back, Marcus Lee, a travel blogger with a decent following, had already begun to stream. Within seconds, the viewer count shot past 10,000, hearts and comments flooding across the screen. The camera captured everything: the slap, the silence, and the woman at the center of it all who refused to cry. Naomi raised her head, her eyes, deep and calm, fixed on Linda's. For a flicker of a second, Linda seemed to falter. What she saw in those eyes wasn't anger. It wasn't even shock. It was something else entirely, a certainty, a quiet force that should have terrified her. Naomi's voice, and when it came, was steady. "I see." Nothing more. 2 words that landed heavier than any outburst could. The cabin exhaled in confusion, unsure what was about to happen next. Linda's knuckles whitened around the beverage cart handle, as if bracing for a fight that never came. Naomi didn't shout, didn't rise. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her blazer a plain gray jacket that made her look more like a professor than a corporate titan, and pulled out her phone. The gesture was calm, deliberate, like someone about to make a grocery list, not someone who had just been assaulted at 35,000 feet. "I need to make a call," she said softly. Passengers leaned forward, sensing something seismic was about to shift. They didn't yet know who she was. They didn't know the weight her words carried. They only knew the woman who had been slapped wasn't ordinary. Up in the cockpit, Captain Robert Miller had no idea that a storm was brewing just a few feet behind his locked door. Down the aisle, a businessman in 22A muttered, "This is out of control." His voice carried, emboldening others. Phones continued recording, flashes of blue light reflecting off cabin walls. Viewers online jumped from 20,000 to 50,000 in under a minute. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred. "Unbelievable. Fire her. Stay strong. Queen." Naomi looked down at the glowing screen of her phone. Her thumb hovered over a single message draft, one she had prepared months ago, not because she expected to use it, but because part of her always knew a day like this might come. Code Black, Crisis Protocol, Level 1. She didn't press send yet. Instead, she took a slow breath. Around her, the weight of silence pressed down like a second atmosphere. 10 minutes to landing. 10 minutes until Linda Hayes's world imploded. 10 minutes until every passenger on board would witness the most spectacular reversal of power they'd ever seen. But Linda didn't know that. None of them did. Naomi's cheek still burned, but her expression remained almost serene. To the untrained eye, she looked like a woman trying to stay composed. To those who studied her closely, they might have noticed the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth, not a smile. Not exactly, but the quiet acknowledgement of inevitability. Justice was about to land with them at JFK. 3 hours before the slap. Dr. Naomi Carter had walked through Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport like any other traveler. No entourage, no polished suit, no hint of the billion-dollar responsibility she carried on her shoulders every day. Instead, she wore a simple gray sweater, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Over her arm hung a canvas tote bag with frayed edges. It looked like the bag of a teacher, or maybe a tired mother juggling work and family. That was the point. Naomi believed in what she called shadow flights, once every month. She booked a random route on her own airline, Liberty Air, under a different name. No one in the crew knew who she was. She never flew first class. She didn't wear the signature gold watch that so often marked her presence in boardrooms. On these flights, she wasn't the CEO of one of the largest carriers in America. She was simply a passenger. Reality checks, she called them. While her executives buried themselves in charts and performance metrics, she preferred to see the truth with her own eyes. And the truth, she often found, was less flattering than the numbers. That morning, her flight was Liberty Air 782 departing Dallas for New York City. The route was familiar, one she had personally helped establish back when Liberty was just a startup with 3 leased planes and a dream. Today, it was one of the busiest corridors in the airline's network. Naomi had chosen seat 22B, a middle seat. Unremarkable, uncomfortable, but perfect for observing how crews treated passengers without status or wealth to shield them. As she walked down the jet bridge, she moved with a steady calm. To anyone watching, she was just another black woman making her way to New York. But inside, her mind carried the weight of years. She remembered her childhood in Atlanta, her mother working double shifts at a diner, sometimes coming home in tears because she had been ignored or belittled by customers who never saw her humanity. She remembered sitting in restaurants where service came slow, too slow, if it came at all. Those memories never faded. They became the compass that guided her leadership. She had built Liberty Air on the principle that dignity was not optional. Every passenger, no matter the seat, deserved to feel respected. But principles in a boardroom didn't always survive at 35,000 feet. Naomi entered the cabin and felt the shift almost immediately. A flight attendant in the front smiled warmly at a white couple in first class, offering to stow their coats. Another attendant leaned down to help an elderly white man adjust his seatbelt. Politeness, warmth, practiced hospitality. By the time Naomi reached row 22, the warmth had thinned. Flight attendant Linda Hayes stood at the aisle, scanning boarding passes with mechanical precision. Her smile tightened when Naomi showed her ticket. 22B, Naomi said gently. Linda glanced at the boarding pass, then at Naomi. There was nothing wrong with the ticket, but her eyes lingered longer than necessary. Finally, she gave a small hum, almost dismissive, before stepping aside. Naomi slid into her seat between a businessman in 22A and a young student in 22C. The businessman gave her a polite nod. The student kept her earbuds in, eyes on her phone. Naomi pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. To anyone else, it might look like a travel journal. In truth, it was her ledger of truth, a quiet catalog of every moment worth remembering. At 11:02 a.m., she wrote her first note. Boarding. Seat 22B. Crew questioned assignment despite accuracy. Greeted white passengers with warmth. Me, minimal acknowledgement. The words were neat, measured. She did not add emotion. She never did. The facts, she believed, spoke loudly enough. As boarding continued, Naomi observed. She noticed how Linda bent down to assist a young white mother with her stroller. Voice sweet with patience. A row later, she told a Latino father bluntly that he needed to hurry and stop blocking the aisle. She noticed how a businessman in row 19 was offered an extra pillow without asking, while a black woman in row 24 was told the flight was short and no pillows were available. Naomi's pen moved steadily, capturing it all. Each moment was small, almost invisible if taken alone. But together, they formed a pattern. And patterns, Naomi knew, were the clearest evidence of systemic rot. She leaned back and closed her eyes, letting the hum of boarding wash over her. For a fleeting moment, she wished her observations would prove her wrong, that maybe today she would see fairness, respect, simple kindness. But deep down, she feared what she already knew, the culture she had sworn to eradicate still lingered in the very company she had built. At 11:18 a.m., boarding completed, the cabin doors closed. Naomi wrote again, pre-takeoff. FA greeted 22A with, "Good afternoon, sir," offered to hang jacket. No acknowledgement to 22B. The businessman beside her noticed. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Naomi with an awkward sympathy. She offered him a small smile, as if to say, "It's all right. I've seen worse." Inside, though, her chest tightened, not with anger, but with something heavier disappointment. She thought of her daughter, a college sophomore in Boston. What kind of world was she inheriting if something as simple as respect remained conditional? Naomi adjusted her seatbelt as the plane taxied. The engines roared to life. Out the window, Dallas shrank into a grid of roads and rooftops. Soon they were climbing, breaking through cloud layers into a sky so blue it almost looked unreal. For a moment, Naomi allowed herself to breathe. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers relaxed. A man across the aisle ordered a Bloody Mary before beverage service officially began. The flight attendant laughed and obliged. When Naomi pressed her call button 20 minutes later, the story shifted again. Linda approached with a thin smile. "Yes." "Could I get a glass of water?" Naomi asked. Her voice was quiet, polite. Linda's smile disappeared. "We'll start beverage service once we're airborne for a while. Please wait." She turned and walked away without another word. Naomi blinked, then glanced at the man in 22A. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. 2 minutes later, he pressed his own call button. "Excuse me," he said when Linda returned. "Could I have some water as well?" Her response was immediate. "Of course, sir." Still or sparkling, Naomi watched the exchange unfold, her pen scratching the page. 11:47 a.m. Request for water denied at 22B. 2 minutes later, same request from 22A, fulfilled with options. The businessman looked embarrassed as Linda set down his glass. He offered Naomi an apologetic shrug. She nodded lightly, assuring him she took no offense. But in truth, every detail weighed on her, because it wasn't about the water, it was about what the water represented. By the time the flight leveled off at 35,000 feet, Naomi had already documented 17 instances of unequal treatment, 17 lines of ink that painted a picture clearer than any corporate report. Her fingers tapped the notebook, her jaw tightening with each entry. She told herself to stay patient, to let the picture form fully before acting. She reminded herself that people reveal who they are most clearly under pressure, and she knew pressure was coming. Naomi looked out the small oval window. The country stretched out beneath them, rivers glinting like silver ribbons, towns no bigger than freckles on the earth. Somewhere down there, her legal team sat ready in Manhattan, somewhere. Her board of directors answered emails, blissfully unaware that in just a few hours their CEO's undercover mission would explode into the biggest crisis Liberty Air had ever faced. Her cheek rested lightly in her palm. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, bracing herself. The sky was deceptively calm, but storms, Naomi knew, often began with silence. The cabin settled into its rhythm. Passengers unfolded laptops, scrolled phones, or tugged eye masks over their faces. The hum of engines filled the air, steady and almost soothing. For a moment, it might have seemed like any other flight. But for Dr. Naomi Carter, the atmosphere felt different, heavy, charged. Every interaction sharpened her awareness, like a pencil pressed too hard against paper. She saw details others dismissed, the tiny fractures in courtesy that revealed something larger. Linda Hayes returned with the beverage cart, metal wheels rattling against the aisle carpet. She smiled brightly at a young couple in 21C and D, offering them pretzels and drinks. Her voice carried a warmth that sounded rehearsed, but convincing enough. When the cart stopped at row 22, her tone cooled. "Drink?" she asked flatly, eyes landing on John Peterson in 22A. "I'll take a coffee," John said. She poured it with practiced ease, even asking, "Cream sugar?" John nodded, and she handed him 2 packets with a smile. Then her gaze shifted to Naomi. The smile vanished. "And for you, water, please," Naomi answered, her voice calm, steady. Linda grabbed a plastic cup, filled it halfway, and set it down with a thud. A few drops splashed onto Naomi's tray table. No napkin, no smile, no cream and sugar equivalent of care. Naomi reached for the cup, her fingers brushing the wet ring on the tray. She took a sip, then quietly wrote another line in her notebook. 12:15 p.m. 22A coffee served with courtesy. 22B water half filled, no napkin. Delivery abrupt. The student in 22C, earbud still in, caught the difference. She glanced from Naomi to Linda, her brow furrowed. She pulled one earbud out, whispering, "That was kind of rude." Naomi gave her a gentle nod. "It's all right," she murmured, though her heart whispered something else. It is not all right. It never was. The cart rolled forward. Passengers relaxed again, but Naomi stayed alert. She had learned long ago that disrespect rarely appeared as one grand act at first. It crept in through smaller ones, disguised as accidents, wrapped in politeness too thin to hide the truth. By 12:42 p.m., another pattern emerged. A passenger in 23A requested help with an overhead bag. Linda brushed him off, saying, "You'll need to manage it yourself." Less than 5 minutes later, she eagerly helped a tall white man 2 rows forward lift his suitcase without hesitation. Naomi's pen moved quickly. Her notes filled half a page now, each line another strand in a web of proof. The businessman beside her finally spoke. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I can't help but notice. She's treating you differently." Naomi's lips curved slightly, a small acknowledgement. "You noticed, too." He hesitated. "I've flown often. But this feels wrong." Naomi closed her notebook for a moment, meeting his gaze. "It is wrong, but it is also familiar." John frowned, unsettled by the weight of her words. The flight stretched on. Meal service began for the longer haul passengers. Small trays clattered onto fold-out tables. Linda handed John a warm meal, smiling again as if nothing had shifted. When it was Naomi's turn, she placed a tray down with an audible sigh. The food was missing utensils. Naomi looked at the empty slot on the tray where the plastic fork and knife should have been. She raised her eyes. "Excuse me, could I get utensils?" Linda's jaw tightened. "I'll see if we have extras." She walked away. Naomi waited and waited. 10 minutes passed. Linda never returned. John eventually leaned toward a passing crew member from another aisle and asked for utensils on Naomi's behalf. They arrived within seconds. Naomi's pen pressed harder this time. The letters darkened as she wrote. 1:05 p.m. Meal served incomplete. Utensils withheld. Request ignored. Fulfilled only via third party. Her hand stilled. She stared at the words, feeling the familiar pull of two opposing forces, restraint and anger. For years, she had taught herself to choose restraint, to master her emotions, to never give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. But sometimes restraint itself carried a cost. She thought of her mother again, those long nights in the diner. She thought of her daughter, still learning where she belonged in a world that often refused to see her. She whispered under her breath, so quietly only she could hear. "Not this time." Around 1:30 p.m. Turbulence rippled through the cabin. The seatbelt sign blinked on. Passengers shifted uneasily as the plane shuddered. Linda moved briskly down the aisle, checking belts. When she reached row 22, her hand brushed Naomi's shoulder roughly. "Seatbelt," she barked. Naomi touched the buckle at her waist. It was already fastened. "I am buckled," she said evenly. Linda narrowed her eyes, as if searching for a flaw, then moved on without apology. The businessman clenched his jaw. That was unnecessary. Naomi let out a slow breath, her calm unbroken. "It tells me what I need to know." Her notebook closed, tucked into her tote. She no longer needed to write. The evidence had already spoken. The turbulence eased. The sky cleared. But inside Naomi, something else was gathering, stronger than any storm outside. At 1:55 p.m., as the cabin relaxed again, Linda returned. This time, her words struck sharper than any shove. "Ma'am," she said coldly, "another passenger has expressed concerns about you. You'll need to move to the back." The air thinned. Conversations halted. Heads turned. Naomi's brows lifted slightly. "Concerns," she repeated. What concerns Linda crossed her arms. Disruption. Non-compliance. John straightened in his seat. "That's not true. She hasn't done anything." His voice carried, loud enough for nearby rows to hear. Murmurs rose. A woman 2 seats back leaned forward. "She's been quiet the whole flight." Linda's lips pressed tight. She looked around, realizing the tide of the cabin wasn't with her. But instead of retreating, she hardened. "You'll need to come with me," she insisted. Naomi stayed seated. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Unless you can provide a specific violation, I will remain in my seat." Linda's cheeks flushed, her nostrils flared. For a moment, it seemed she might lash out again right then. The cabin grew tense, air charged with anticipation. Passengers held up phones, cameras glowing red. The live stream from Marcus Lee, now fully rolling from 3 rows back, showed comments exploding. Tens of thousands of viewers poured in. "Stay strong. She's handling this with class. This is about to blow up." Linda's hand twitched at her side. And then, in a moment that would ricochet across the internet within hours, she raised it. The slap landed before anyone could stop her. Gasps rippled. Phones captured it all. Naomi's head turned sharply with the force, but she didn't fall. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply looked back, eyes unwavering. "Thank you," she whispered. Passengers froze. They didn't yet understand what those words meant, but Naomi did. Because with that slap, Linda had handed her the one thing she needed most: undeniable evidence. The calm before the storm was over. The sound of the slap still lingered in the air, as if it had etched itself into the pressurized cabin. Passengers sat stunned, frozen in the aftermath. Naomi Carter had not raised her voice. She had not lashed back. She simply looked at the woman who had struck her, her eyes deep pools of unshaken resolve. Around them, whispers spread like sparks on dry grass. She hit her. Did that really just happen? It's all on video. Linda Hayes stood stiff, chest heaving, eyes darting from phone to phone. She realized too late that half the cabin had captured what she had done. Still, her pride refused to bend. She jabbed a finger toward Naomi. "You're out of line," she hissed. "You've been nothing but trouble since you boarded. If you don't move, I'll have security waiting when we land." Naomi touched her cheek gently. It still burned, the sting now mingling with a dull throb. But inside, she felt something different, an almost profound stillness. Her daughter's face flashed in her mind. The nights she had sat at the kitchen table telling her, "The world won't always treat you fairly, but you get to choose how you respond. Never let them decide your worth." Naomi straightened in her seat. She spoke softly, but the quiet made her words sharper than any shout. "I will not move." Gasps. The defiance wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Linda's nostrils flared. "Then you'll regret it." She spun on her heel and stormed down the aisle, muttering into her radio. The beverage cart rattled as she shoved it aside. John Peterson in 22A leaned closer, his face pale with disbelief. "She hit you. You could press charges right now." Naomi gave him a small nod. "I could." Her eyes softened. "But sometimes justice needs to be bigger than a single charge." John swallowed, unsure what she meant. 3 rows back, Marcus Lee angled his phone carefully, the live stream capturing Naomi's composed profile. Comments scrolled faster than he could read. "She's a queen. Who is this woman? Don't back down. Tag CNN." The viewer count ticked past $120,000. Naomi reached for her phone. She didn't rush. Her fingers moved with the deliberate rhythm of someone who knew time was on her side. She opened her secure messages. Her thumb hovered over a prepared code she had written months earlier but had never imagined deploying mid-air. She paused. She thought about the boardroom she had left in Dallas just the day before, executives congratulating themselves on quarterly gains. She thought about the letters from customers who felt invisible, stories that sometimes never reached her desk. And she thought about her own promise, the vow she had made the day Liberty Air became hers. Every passenger will be treated with dignity. The sting on her cheek told her that promise had been broken. She pressed send. The message shot through encrypted lines to Liberty Air's Crisis Command Center in Manhattan. 3 words. Nothing more. Code black. Level 1. Inside a nondescript office on the 38th floor of a midtown tower, a red light blinked on a console. An operator picked it up, eyes widening at the sender ID. Within seconds, alerts cascaded through phones and laptops of Liberty Air's top executives. Back in the cabin, Naomi's voice carried in the stillness. "Captain Miller," she said, holding her phone up. "This is Dr. Naomi Carter in seat 22B. Confirm you can hear me." The intercom crackled. A startled male voice came through, cautious but steady. "Dr. Carter, I wasn't aware you were on this flight." Gasps rippled through the rows. Passengers turned to one another, confusion flashing into realization. The woman who had been slapped wasn't just a passenger. She was their CEO, Linda Hayes, standing near the galley, froze, The blood drained from her face. Naomi didn't gloat. She simply placed the phone on speaker and spoke with the even cadence of someone used to boardrooms and congressional hearings. "Captain, please be advised. A crisis protocol has been initiated. Upon landing, law enforcement should be present at the gate, ensure the safety of passengers, and document all crew interactions from this moment forward." Her words were calm, almost routine, but in the cabin they thundered like a revelation. The businessman beside her whispered, "My God, you're the CEO." Naomi turned her head slightly, acknowledging him with a quiet smile. "Yes." Marcus Lee's live stream exploded. Comments blurred in all caps. "She's the CEO plot twist of the year. History in the making. Respect her composure." Viewership doubled again. By the time the plane began its descent into JFK, more than 400,000 people were watching live. Linda stumbled forward, her voice trembling now. "Dr. Carter, I didn't know." Naomi's eyes met hers, steady as stone. "You didn't need to know who I was. Respect is not reserved for rank." Linda's lips parted, searching for words, but nothing came. Naomi lifted her phone again, dialing a conference line. The call connected. Two voices joined William Grant, chairman of the board, and Elena Brooks, Liberty Air's general counsel. "Dr. Carter." William's voice boomed through speaker. "We received the code. We're mobilizing now." Naomi nodded slightly. "Good. Mark the time. Document the incident. Upon arrival, Flight Attendant Linda Hayes is to be suspended immediately, pending investigation. A full audit of this crew begins today." Linda's knees weakened. She gripped the galley wall, pale and silent. Elena Brooks's voice came next, precise and sharp. "Legal is on standby. We've already drafted preliminary statements. Dr. Carter, are you safe?" "Yes," Naomi said. Her hand brushed the welt on her cheek. "And every passenger here is witness, including 500,000 online." William inhaled sharply. 500,000. "Yes," Naomi confirmed, "and climbing." The cabin erupted with murmurs, awe mixed with relief. The businessman shook his head slowly. "I've never seen anything like this." Naomi closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, she looked not at Linda but at the faces of the passengers who had sat silently through every microaggression, every dismissal. Her voice softened. "This isn't just about me. It's about every traveler who's ever been made to feel small. Today, the silence ends at 35,000 feet. Phones recorded, hearts pounded. The descent into New York felt different now. Not just another landing, but the approach of a reckoning. Naomi folded her hands in her lap, composed. Justice was already in motion. The skyline of New York came into view, jagged steel rising against the late afternoon haze. The cabin shifted as passengers buckled in, tray tables clicked shut, and window shades lifted. But the air inside Liberty Air Flight 782 felt unlike any other descent. Every heart seemed to beat faster, every breath charged with anticipation. Naomi Carter sat upright in 22B, her tote bag at her feet, her phone still glowing in her hand. She had not spoken further to Linda Hayes. There was nothing left to say. The power balance had shifted so completely that silence itself had become a judgment. Linda lingered in the galley, eyes wide, face pale, hands trembling against the counter. She tried to busy herself straightening cups, adjusting napkins, but her motions were jerky, disordered. She avoided looking at the passengers, avoided looking at Naomi most of all. The businessman John Peterson sat stiffly beside Naomi, glancing from her composed profile to the aisle where Linda stood frozen. He finally whispered, "I still can't believe it. You've been sitting here all this time, and you're—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Naomi gave him a small nod, her voice soft but firm. Sometimes the only way to see truth is to walk through it quietly. Titles can blind as much as they protect. John exhaled. You handled it better than anyone could. Naomi's eyes held his for a moment. I didn't handle it for me. I handled it for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. The words settled over him, heavy with meaning. He looked down at his coffee cup, ashamed of how many times in his life he had seen such moments and chosen silence. The plane dipped lower, wheels groaning as they prepared for landing. Captain Robert Miller's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be touching down at John F. Kennedy International in about 5 minutes. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. But the tone was different, strained, almost formal. Passengers knew something more awaited them on the ground. As the runway rushed up, Naomi closed her eyes briefly. She could already picture the gate officers waiting, cameras flashing, questions shouted. She braced herself not for the chaos, but for the choice she knew she would have to make, how to turn this moment into more than spectacle, how to make it the beginning of change. The wheels screeched against asphalt. The cabin jolted, and then the roar of engines reversed as the plane slowed. Passengers clapped half-heartedly, the old tradition colliding with the tension that still hung thick in the air. Naomi opened her eyes. The sting on her cheek had dulled to an ache, but it was no longer pain. It was a mark of testimony. The plane taxied, turning slowly toward the gate. Out the window, flashing blue and red lights, appeared airport police cruisers stationed on the tarmac. Gasps spread through the rows. Phones tilted to capture the scene. They're really here, someone whispered. Yes, Naomi said softly. They are. The jet bridge extended, a hollow arm reaching for the cabin door. The chime sounded, but no one moved. They were waiting, breathless, for what came next. 2 uniformed officers boarded first, followed by a woman in a dark blazer with the insignia of the Port Authority. Their steps were purposeful, their eyes scanning quickly. Seat 22B, the officer asked, his tone professional. Naomi raised her hand calmly. That's me. Linda Hayes let out a sharp breath, stepping forward. She's the one causing. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, step aside. We have instructions. His words silenced the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, eager to see justice unfold. Marcus Lee's livestream camera shook as he tried to capture every angle. The viewer count ticked past $600,000. Naomi stood slowly, smoothing her sweater, collecting her tote. She did not look at Linda as she passed. Instead, she addressed the officer. I'm fine, but I need you to take the statement of every passenger who witnessed the incident, and I need documentation of this crew's conduct preserved immediately. The woman from the Port Authority nodded firmly. Understood. Dr. Carter. The use of her title rippled through the cabin like a second revelation. Even those who hadn't heard the intercom earlier now realized the truth. The woman they had seen slapped was the very head of Liberty Air. Linda stumbled forward again, her voice cracking. I didn't know. If I had known she was Naomi finally turned to her, her gaze steady but not cruel. That's exactly the point. Respect should never depend on who someone is. It should depend on our shared humanity. The words landed heavy. Some passengers clapped softly. Others simply sat, shaken. The officers stepped closer to Linda. Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us. Her eyes widened. You're arresting me for assault, one officer confirmed. Yes. Gasps and whispers filled the cabin as handcuffs clicked. Linda's face crumpled, pride collapsing into fear. She looked at Naomi as if hoping for mercy, but Naomi's expression held only truth. Actions have consequences, she said gently. The officers guided Linda down the aisle, past the rows of watching faces, past the dozens of phones capturing her walk of shame. The galley door closed behind her. Naomi remained standing. She addressed the passengers, her voice low but carrying. "You have all seen what happened here. Some of you recorded it. Some of you spoke up. For that, I thank you. Today isn't just about me. It's about what happens when silence is broken and when dignity is defended." A murmur of agreement rippled. A woman in 24C wiped tears from her eyes. A man near the front raised his voice. "We've got your back." Naomi inclined her head. Hold on to that. Because change doesn't come from a single person. It comes when we refuse to look away. With that, she walked toward the front of the plane. The officers parted to let her through. Cameras followed. Flashbulbs exploded the moment she stepped into the jet bridge. Reporters were already there, tipped off by the live stream that had gone viral in real time. Questions rained down. "Dr. Carter, what happened? Will there be charges? How will Liberty respond?" Naomi lifted a hand. "Later, right now, I want to thank the passengers who stood with me." Their courage mattered. She moved with calm assurance, the chaos swirling around her like a storm she had long prepared for. On the tarmac, the evening air was cool against her skin. Police cars idled nearby. An unmarked sedan waited to take her to headquarters. As she slid into the back seat, Naomi glanced once more at the plane. Behind those oval windows were ordinary travelers who had just witnessed something extraordinary. Their stories would spread, their recordings would multiply, and she knew this was only the beginning. In her mind, she saw the boardroom that awaited her, the press conferences, the reforms she would demand. The slap had been a wound, but it was also a spark. And sparks, in the right hands, could set entire systems ablaze. The terminal was chaos. Cameras clustered near Gate 14. News anchors shouted over one another. Microphones bristled like a forest of steel stems. The clip of the slap had already played on every major network, replayed in slow motion, dissected frame by frame. Naomi Carter stepped into the terminal, flanked by Port Authority officers, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, her cheek still faintly red. For a split second, the crowd went quiet, as if the air itself bowed under the weight of the moment. Then the noise erupted. "Dr. Carter, is it true you were assaulted by your own employee? Do you believe this reflects systemic racism at Liberty Air? Will you press charges?" Naomi raised her hand. The gesture was small, but it carried authority. The voices softened, microphones extended closer. "I will answer your questions," she said steadily, "but not here, right now. My priority is ensuring every passenger who witnessed this event is safe, supported, and given the chance to be heard. This isn't only about me. It's about them. Please direct your questions to Liberty Air's headquarters, where we will be holding a press conference within 24 hours. Her voice carried calm, but beneath it, her heart beat harder than she let show. This wasn't about controlling headlines. This was about framing a truth big enough to outlast the cycle of outrage. The sedan door closed behind her, muting the noise. Inside the car, her reflection stared back from the dark glass. The faint mark on her cheek had already become a symbol, one she hadn't chosen but would now carry. Across the city, Liberty Air's headquarters had erupted into its own storm. The 30-second clip of the slap had been viewed over 8 million times in 3 hours. Share prices wavered, hashtags trended worldwide. Chairman William Grant's voice crackled through the secure line patched into the sedan. "Naomi, the board is assembled. We've invoked emergency protocol. You need to address us immediately." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "Send the feed. I'll speak from the car." A tablet was handed to her, the screen filled with familiar faces, board members, legal advisors, corporate officers, all staring at her as though she were both savior and liability. Grant leaned forward. "This is catastrophic. Our legal team is fielding calls from the FAA, DOT, and Congress. We need to know your position." Naomi's voice was even. "My position is that what happened today is not a public relations inconvenience. It's a mirror, and the reflection isn't flattering." A murmur rippled through the virtual room. Elena Brooks, General Counsel, spoke next. "We need to protect the company from liability. If you frame this as a systemic failure, it is systemic," Naomi interrupted, her tone sharp but not raised. Linda Hayes wasn't the first employee to treat a passenger differently because of race. She was simply the first to do it on camera with the wrong passenger. If we pretend this is isolated, we fail not just morally, but strategically. The public will know. Our customers will know. Her words hung heavy. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. Others looked chastened. Grant rubbed his temple. "And what do you propose?" Naomi's answer came without hesitation. "Immediate action, full cooperation with federal authorities, termination of involved employees, a comprehensive audit of every discrimination complaint lodged in the last decade, mandatory retraining for all staff, starting with management, and creation of an independent oversight body with power to enforce accountability." Silence stretched across the feed. Finally, one director muttered, "That's extreme." Naomi's gaze sharpened. What's extreme is a flight attendant slapping a passenger at 35,000 feet and believing she'd face no consequences. What's extreme is passengers of color boarding our aircraft every day and wondering if dignity will cost extra. What's extreme is thinking this company can survive without radical change when the world just saw exactly who we are. Her voice did not rise, but the weight of it pressed on every ear. Grant sighed. "Very well. We'll convene a special session tomorrow. Draft your proposals tonight. But Naomi, be careful. You're walking a line between reform and destruction." She leaned back, her eyes hard. "Sometimes you have to destroy the rotten structure before you can rebuild." The line went dead. The car sped through Queens toward headquarters. Outside, billboards glowed, traffic honked, the city alive and oblivious. Inside, Naomi wrestled with a gnawing ache not in her cheek but in her chest. For years she had built Liberty Air into a symbol of access, of possibility, and yet rot had festered in corners she hadn't wanted to see. She whispered to herself, almost a prayer, "Don't let me waste this pain." When the sedan pulled up to Liberty Air Tower, the plaza was already flooded with employees, some curious, some nervous, some holding up phones. Naomi stepped out, lifting her chin. The crowd parted, whispers rising. "That's her. She's the one. Our CEO." Inside, the crisis command room hummed with activity. Screens showed news feeds looping the slap, charts of trending hashtags, clips of passenger interviews at JFK. Marcus Lee's live stream still blared across one monitor. His shaky camera had captured not only the slap, but Naomi's calm afterward, her words about dignity, her authority revealed midair. The caption under the clip read, "Respect has no first class." The phrase was already trending. Naomi paused in front of the screen, watching herself speak those words. They didn't feel like strategy. They felt like truth. Her chief communications officer, Elena Brooks, approached, face pale. "We can't contain it. Every outlet is running the story. There's no spin strong enough." "We're not spinning," Naomi said firmly. "We're owning. Prepare a statement. Liberty Air acknowledges systemic discrimination, commits to independent oversight, and promises reforms beginning immediately." Elena blinked. "You want to admit liability?" Naomi met her eyes. "I want to admit reality. If we hide, we die. If we lead, we survive. The room stilled. For a moment, even the whir of servers seemed to pause. Naomi took a seat at the head of the long table, placing her worn tote beside her, pulling out the same notebook she had scribbled in midair. She opened to a page marked with her own handwriting, 17 incidents before the slap. She slid it forward. This is our evidence. This is where we begin. As the room leaned in, Naomi felt a tremor of fatigue pass through her. The slap still echoed in her memory, but so did the applause of passengers, the solidarity of strangers, the chant of truth breaking through silence. She knew the firestorm would not fade quickly, but she also knew that out of fire came the chance to forge something stronger. And she intended to seize it. The next morning, Liberty Air Tower gleamed like polished steel against the New York skyline. A line of satellite vans stretched along the avenue, their dishes pointed skyward. Crowds pressed against barricades. Some held signs, justice at 35,000 feet, others just held phones, eager to capture history in real time. Inside, the main atrium had been transformed into a press theater, rows of chairs, a podium with the Liberty Air insignia, lights angled for broadcast. Reporters murmured, testing microphones, shuffling notes. At precisely 10 a.m., the side door opened. Dr. Naomi Carter walked in, composed in a navy suit, hair swept back, a single pearl at each ear. The faint mark on her cheek had faded, but not vanished. She made no attempt to cover it. Cameras flashed like a storm. Naomi placed her tote on the floor beside the podium and opened her leather notebook. She looked up, scanning the sea of faces, journalists, employees, advocates, ordinary citizens. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the silence stretch until the room stilled. Then she began. "Good morning. My name is Dr. Naomi Carter. Yesterday, on Liberty Air Flight 782 from Los Angeles to New York, I was assaulted by a member of my own crew." The words hung heavy. Gasps rippled, even though the world had already seen the footage. Hearing it spoken aloud was different. I want to be clear, this is not about one person, one slap, or one flight. This is about a culture that has been allowed to fester not only in this company, but across an industry that too often turns a blind eye to bias. What happened to me happens to passengers every day, only without cameras, without live streams, without the leverage of a title behind their name. Murmurs spread, pens scratched furiously. Naomi's voice remained steady, her cadence deliberate, crafted for ears and for hearts. When I founded Liberty Air, I built it on a belief that dignity in travel should not depend on the color of your skin, the size of your paycheck, or the seat printed on your boarding pass. Yesterday, that belief was tested, and while I endured humiliation, what hurt most was realizing how many passengers have endured the same, unseen and unheard. She paused, her eyes moving over the crowd, settling briefly on a young black woman in a Liberty uniform who stood at the back. Tears brimming. Naomi let the silence deepen before continuing. I could have revealed my identity the moment I was questioned, the moment I was denied, the moment I was slapped, but I chose not to, because I needed the truth to unfold unfiltered. I needed evidence of just how broken our culture had become. She turned a page in her notebook. In 3 hours, I documented 17 separate instances of differential treatment on that flight, 17 moments where dignity was divided by skin color, accent, or income, 17 proofs that this was not an accident, but a pattern. And those notes, she held up the worn pages, are now evidence in what will become the largest anti-discrimination overhaul in the history of aviation. The room erupted, camera shutters, reporters shouting questions. She raised her hand, and again, the noise hushed. "Here is what will happen next," Naomi said, effective immediately. Liberty Air is implementing mandatory 40-hour anti-bias and dignity training for every employee, from pilots to baggage handlers. We are establishing an independent oversight council with authority to investigate complaints and enforce accountability. All past discrimination cases will be reopened and reviewed by outside auditors. And a new ombuds office will provide passengers and employees with direct recourse, free from interference. A reporter near the front shot up his hand. Dr. Carter, some say this is a public relations strategy to protect your brand. How do you respond? Naomi's gaze held him. Public relations is about appearances. This is about survival not of the company, but of our humanity. If we can't treat each other with basic dignity, then Liberty Air doesn't deserve to survive. Another reporter called out, "Do you feel any responsibility for what happened to flight attendant Linda Hayes?" Naomi inhaled, considering. "Yes, I feel responsible for leading a company that failed to address her prior complaints. I feel responsible for a culture that allowed her to believe her actions carried no consequence. But responsibility is not the same as guilt. She chose to slap a passenger. That was her choice. And actions have consequences." The words echoed, the same ones she had spoken on the plane. She softened slightly. "But I will not let her downfall be the end of this story. It must be the beginning of a new one where we confront prejudice before it escalates into violence." Behind her, a screen flickered to life, displaying a new logo. The Carter Foundation. This morning, I am launching the Carter Foundation, seeded with $50 million, dedicated to supporting victims of discrimination in transportation, hospitality, and customer service industries. Because what happened in row 22B isn't unique. It happens in hotels, in restaurants, in waiting rooms, in offices. Too often, silence allows it to continue. That ends now. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling until the atrium thundered. Employees stood, reporters lowered pens, even skeptics seemed moved. Naomi raised her hand once more. "My final message is this. Every time we remain silent in the face of injustice, we give it permission to continue. Every time we speak up, we create the possibility of change. Record everything, document everything, share everything. In the age of social media, injustice cannot hide in the shadows." Her eyes swept the room, voice firm but warm. "Respect has no first class. It is universal. It is non-negotiable." The phrase landed like a gavel. Cameras flashed furiously. Hashtags exploded online within minutes. "Respect has no first class" became the top trend on Twitter, echoed on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Naomi closed her notebook, gathered her tote, and stepped back from the podium. She did not smile. She did not wave. She simply walked off stage, leaving her words to carry themselves. Behind her, the crowd remained standing, the echo of her voice reverberating long after she was gone. By noon, the Carter press conference had already reshaped the national conversation. Every major network replayed her words on loop. Clips of her saying respect has no first class ran alongside footage of the slap, contrasting brutality with poise. On Twitter, hashtags trended across the top 5. Respect has no first class. Ma, Naomi Carter. La, justice at 35,000 feet. Liberty Air crisis dignity in the skies. Cable pundits dissected every syllable. Some praised her leadership. Others warned of overcorrection. Yet even critics admitted the cultural moment was undeniable. In Washington, the House Committee on Transportation announced emergency hearings. Civil rights leaders called it a turning point. Airline unions scrambled to reassure the public. Shareholders demanded answers. And in living rooms across America, ordinary people debated over dinner tables and in office break rooms. Some relived their own humiliations in airports, hotels, or taxis. Stories poured onto social media. "This happened to me in Dallas last year. My father was escorted off a plane for no reason. In 2019, for the first time, millions saw their pain reflected in the face of a powerful CEO who had endured the same treatment. Naomi Carter, however, sat alone in her office on the 40th floor of Liberty Air Tower, lights dimmed, city sprawling beyond the glass. Her tote bag rested by her chair, her notebook still open. The applause of the press conference had faded, replaced by the low hum of air vents and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She leaned back, closing her eyes. The images replayed Linda Hayes's hand rising, the sting, the stunned silence. Even now, her cheek seemed to tingle with phantom heat. For a moment, she allowed herself vulnerability. She whispered into the empty office. Why did it take violence for them to listen? Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Lee, the travel blogger who had live-streamed the slap. Dr. Carter, I just want you to know, people are sharing their stories because of you. My inbox is full of passengers telling me they finally feel seen. Thank you for not staying silent. Naomi smiled faintly. The weight didn't lift, but it shifted. A knock at the door. Elena Brooks entered, her tablet glowing with fresh reports. Naomi, the Foundation's launch is dominating headlines. Donations are already pouring in $500,000 in 3 hours, mostly small amounts from ordinary people. It's becoming a movement. Naomi exhaled, her voice soft. Good. That means it belongs to them, not just to me. Elena hesitated, but the backlash is real too. Some commentators are calling this corporate suicide. Stock dipped another 3%. A few board members are nervous. Naomi opened her eyes. Let them be nervous. Change without cost isn't change. It's charity. Elena studied her for a moment, then nodded. Congress just confirmed hearings next week. They want you to testify. Naomi leaned forward, fingers steepled. Then we'll prepare. This is bigger than liberty now. As Elena left, Naomi rose and walked to the window. Below, traffic pulsed along Lexington Avenue. Horns blared. Life moved on, indifferent. Yet she knew the ground had shifted. She thought of her late father, who had once been humiliated at a bus station in Montgomery when she was a child. She remembered clutching his hand as an attendant barked at him, forcing him to wait in the rain. He had squeezed her palm gently and whispered, "Stand tall, baby girl. They can't take your dignity unless you hand it to them." Tears pricked her eyes. She whispered to the skyline, "I didn't hand it to them, Daddy. I never will." Her phone buzzed again, this time a call. Congressman Harold Jennings, chair of the Transportation Committee. "Dr. Carter." His voice boomed when she answered. "You've set Washington on fire. The hearings will be brutal, but you have allies. Don't back down." "I won't," Naomi replied. "This isn't about me. It's about every passenger who deserves better." "Good. We'll see you next Thursday, after the call." Naomi sank back into her chair. The fatigue pressed in, heavy as stone, but beneath it, a strange calm. She had stepped into the firestorm willingly. Now she would walk through it. That evening, she allowed herself a moment of ordinary life. She returned to her apartment, a modest loft in Tribeca, where the hum of the refrigerator and the soft glow of lamps greeted her. She brewed chamomile tea, slipped off her heels, and sat barefoot on the couch. Her television blinked with a live debate. A commentator sneered, "She's weaponizing victimhood for profit." Another shot back. Or maybe she's exposing an industry's dirty secret. Naomi muted the screen. She didn't need their noise. She needed stillness. She opened her notebook again, writing in steady script. "Pain must not end with me. It must begin with change." As she wrote, her phone chimed once more, a video message forwarded from a colleague. A young girl, no more than 12, speaking into her webcam. "Dr. Carter, I saw what happened to you on the plane. My mom told me she's been treated bad when we fly too, but she said because you spoke up. Maybe it will be different for me when I grow up. Thank you." Naomi pressed the phone to her chest. For the first time since the slap, tears fell freely. Not from pain, from hope. The ripple had become a wave, and Naomi Carter was ready to ride it. The marble corridors of Capitol Hill echoed with the shuffle of polished shoes and the low hum of reporters setting up cameras. The House Committee on Transportation had called an emergency session, and the hearing room was packed to capacity. Rows of congressmen and women sat elevated behind long wooden benches. Nameplates gleamed. Microphones glowed red. Every major news outlet carried the feed live. Dr. Naomi Carter entered quietly, her navy suit pressed, her pearl earrings gleaming under the lights. She walked with deliberate calm, her leather notebook clutched in one hand. The faint scar on her cheek was no longer red, but it remained visible like a scarlet punctuation mark that no amount of makeup could erase. As she took her seat at the witness table, flashes erupted. Reporters whispered, "There she is, America's most powerful CEO, the woman who brought liberty to its knees." Congressman Harold Jennings, the committee chair, adjusted his glasses and leaned into the microphone. "This committee is convened to investigate the incident aboard Liberty Air Flight 782, the subsequent response, and the broader issue of discrimination in commercial aviation. We welcome Dr. Naomi Carter, CEO of Liberty Air." "Dr. Carter, thank you for being here." Naomi nodded. "Thank you." "Chairman Jennings." Jennings gestured. "You may begin with an opening statement." Naomi opened her notebook, her voice steady. "On September 18th, I boarded Flight 782 as a paying passenger. I was humiliated, profiled, and eventually assaulted by a member of my crew. The footage of that slap has traveled the world, but it is only the surface of the problem. Beneath it lies a culture of systemic bias that has gone unaddressed for decades." She lifted a page. "I documented 17 instances of unequal treatment on that flight alone. This is not a matter of one flight attendant, one airline, or one CEO. It is a national issue. Every passenger deserves dignity at 35,000 feet. My message remains the same: respect has no first class." Applause broke out from the public gallery. Jennings rapped his gavel. "Order." The first questions came from allies. Congresswoman Maria Lopez praised Naomi's courage. Senator Thomas Green asked how oversight could be implemented across the industry. Naomi answered with clarity: independent counsels, transparency, mandatory reporting. Then came the twist. Congressman Richard Hale, a sharp-featured man with a reputation for theatrics, leaned forward with a smirk. "Dr. Carter," he began, his drawl heavy, "isn't it true that you are using this incident to push a personal agenda, that you staged your silence, your so-called restraint, to maximize public sympathy? After all, you're not just any passenger, you're the CEO. You had the power to stop it at any moment. Why didn't you?" Gasps filled the chamber. Cameras zoomed in on Naomi's face. She didn't flinch. She looked Hale in the eye. "Congressman, I didn't stop it because I needed the truth to be seen in its raw form. If I had announced myself as CEO at the first sign of disrespect, the truth would have been hidden again, smoothed over, excused, denied. I chose silence so the world could hear the unfiltered voice of discrimination. That was not theater. That was reality." Hale smirked. "Or convenient martyrdom?" Before Naomi could answer, a voice rose from the gallery. "That's not true." Heads turned. Marcus Lee, the travel blogger, stood. His voice shook but carried, "I was there. I live-streamed the whole thing. She didn't perform. She endured. And if she hadn't, nobody would believe what we've all gone through for years. She gave us proof. Security moved toward him, but Jennings lifted a hand. Let him speak. Marcus continued, eyes blazing. I've been harassed on flights before, brushed off when I complained. This time, I saw someone powerful treated the same way, and instead of pulling rank, she let it play out so the world could see. That's not martyrdom, that's sacrifice. Applause thundered. Hale flushed, shifting uncomfortably. Then another voice, John Peterson, the businessman from 22A, raised his hand from the back row. He had come voluntarily, quietly, but now his voice was firm. I'm white. I'm wealthy. I've never been treated the way Dr. Carter was treated that day. I watched it unfold with my own eyes, and I can tell you if that slap had landed on me, this entire airline would have bent over backward to apologize before we touched down. The only reason it didn't is because of the color of her skin. That's the truth. Congressman, the chamber exploded. Applause, shouts, chants. Respect has no first class. Respect has no first class. Jennings banged his gavel. Order Naomi sat silently through the noise, her hand resting lightly on her notebook. When the room finally calmed, she spoke softly. This isn't about me winning an argument. It's about the millions of passengers who board planes each year and wonder if they'll be treated with dignity. I came here to tell you the system is broken, but we can fix it if we have the courage. Even Hale stayed silent. By the end of the hearing, Naomi's words and the testimonies of Marcus Lee and John Peterson dominated headlines. What was meant as a political ambush had turned into a defining moment of solidarity. As she left the chamber, cameras flashing, Naomi whispered to herself the words of her father. Stand tall. They can't take your dignity unless you hand it to them. She hadn't handed it over, and now the whole nation was standing taller with her. 2 weeks after the hearing, Liberty Air Tower stood at the center of a storm that no longer felt like crisis. It felt like rebirth. The Department of Transportation announced sweeping new guidelines, modeled directly on Naomi Carter's testimony. Every major U.S. airline would be required to establish independent bias oversight councils, implement transparent complaint reporting, and tie executive compensation to diversity and equity benchmarks. The industry was shaken, but the public applauded. Headlines called it the Carter Standard. At Liberty Air itself, reforms moved quickly. Linda Hayes had been formally terminated and now faced civil charges. The Oversight Council began reviewing a backlog of discrimination complaints. Many long ignored. Training modules were rolled out across airports, hangars, and cockpits. For the first time in the company's history, employees of every rank from janitors to executives were seated together in mandatory workshops. The ripple had become a current strong enough to shift the whole tide. On a crisp October morning, Naomi walked quietly through Terminal B at JFK. Passengers bustled, announcements echoed, but there was a new undercurrent in the air watchfulness: accountability. She noticed a gate agent crouching to help an elderly black woman with her bag. A flight attendant patiently guiding a family who spoke limited English. Small moments, but ones that mattered. A little girl recognized her, tugging her mother's sleeve. Mama, that's her. That's the lady from the TV. Naomi smiled softly, crouched down, and asked the girl her name. Amaya. The child said, shyly. Well, Amaya, Naomi replied, you deserve to fly with dignity every single time. Don't forget that. The girl nodded solemnly, as if receiving a promise. Later that day, Naomi sat in her office, the skyline glowing amber in the autumn sun. Marcus Lee visited, camera slung over his shoulder. You know, he said, people are calling this the Carter movement. My live stream has 6 million views now, but what sticks most isn't the slap. It's how you handled it. Calm, steady, like you knew the whole world was watching. Naomi shook her head. I didn't know. I just refused to let them take my dignity. Marcus grinned. Well, you gave a lot of us ours back. He left, and Naomi lingered at the window. For the first time since the flight, the ache in her chest felt lighter. That evening, she hosted a small dinner at her apartment, close friends, allies, board members who had stood by her. John Peterson attended too, his presence quiet but meaningful. He raised a glass. "To Dr. Carter," he said, "for showing us that justice can be calm, and calm can be powerful." They clinked glasses. Laughter filled the room, but later, alone again. Naomi pulled out her leather notebook. She turned to the final page, where she had written weeks ago, "Pain must not end with me. It must begin with change." She added a new line, "And change must carry hope." The television in the corner hummed with news coverage of Liberty Air's new policies. Commentators debated stock prices, regulatory battles, partisan angles. Naomi muted the sound. She didn't need analysts to tell her what mattered. She had seen it in Amaya's eyes, in Marcus's conviction, in John Peterson's honesty at the hearing. Change wasn't abstract anymore. It was living, breathing, unfolding. A knock at her door. Helena Brooks entered, weary but smiling. "Naomi, I just wanted to say thank you. Working for you. It's the first time I've believed this company could actually live up to its name." Naomi embraced her. "Thank you for believing with me." They stood quietly for a moment, two women bound not by titles, but by conviction. That night, Naomi dreamed of her father again. She was a child at that bus station, clutching his hand in the rain. But this time, when the attendant barked, her father didn't bow his head. He looked up, calm and steady, and the rain stopped. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but also a smile. The next morning, as she prepared for another day of rebuilding, she paused at her mirror. The scar on her cheek was fading, almost invisible, but she didn't wish it gone. It was a reminder not of humiliation, but of resilience. Her phone buzzed a message from Congressman Jennings. "The Carter Standard passed committee. Full vote next week. History is moving." Naomi typed back, "Respect has no first class. Let's make sure it never will." She slipped the phone into her bag, picked up her notebook, and stepped out into the morning light. The storm was not over, but she was no longer bracing against it. She was steering through it, and in her wake, an entire nation was beginning to believe in a new standard of dignity, one that could never again be slapped away. The story of Dr. Naomi Carter is more than an airline scandal. It is a mirror held up to society. It reminds us that dignity is not something granted by a uniform, a ticket, or a title. Dignity is a birthright, and the way we treat strangers reflects the way we value ourselves. For older generations who have witnessed decades of change, this story resonates even more deeply. It echoes moments of humiliation endured in silence and the quiet resilience that carried families forward. Naomi's choice to respond not with rage, but with calm authority teaches us that true strength is not loud. It is measured, steady, and undeniable. Her journey also offers a practical lesson document in justice. Speak truth with clarity, and refuse to surrender your self-worth. In a world where technology makes silence impossible, even one voice can spark reform. And perhaps the most important reminder is this: while systems may fail us, we each hold the power to create change. In our homes, our communities, and our workplaces, respect must never have a first class. It must belong to everyone. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you of your own journey, please show your support like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep these conversations alive and build a world where dignity belongs to us all.